On the Track is a web TV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy!
What's in this episode, Mr. John?
Well, Hennis, we've got a very special show for you today, one that worked out completely different than the way we had originally intended. It starts off as the story of a 6th century sea monster in the Bosphorus, and then goes down various rabbit holes from then on. Enjoy.
I really like the old credits.
Ken, what we got for the viewers in today's show? Oh, we got a real treat. We are going over live to John Craven's News Round, and there's a special report on some new groundbreaking experiments at Porton Down, where they are putting wood lice in jars of water overnight to see if they evolve into trilobites.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to another episode of On the Track. As you already know, it's Saturday afternoon, and Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock can only mean one thing. Only one thing of importance in the entire universe happens every Saturday afternoon at 3, and that's a new episode of On the Track. Because every Saturday afternoon at 3 for half an hour, and every Friday evening at 6:30 for about half that, we bring you a collection of stories about hard science, weird shit, and what was the other thing? Archie, what's the other thing?
It's surreality, Dad.
Oh yes, surreality. And what's surreality? Archie, what's surreality?
I don't know, Dad. I think you ought to ask Lord Aberdeen.
Well, Archibald, surreality is a bit like when you have a talking dog in a serious program about cryptozoology and allied disciplines. I should know, because I'm an expert.
So, Richard, the other night you told me something particularly peculiar just after you arrived here, and it was something that neither of us had ever heard about before. So, let's talk turkey!
I was pootling around on the internet and came across an account of something that I'd never heard before, and it was about a 6th century sea monster called Bosphorus, which roughly translates from Latin as purple boy, who haunted the Bosphorus in the 6th century.
The Bosphorus is, of course, the very narrow strait, 2 miles apart at its widest and about half a mile wide at its most narrow, and only 360 feet deep at its deepest. It's a narrow strait which separates European Turkey from Asian Turkey, and it links the Mediterranean and the Aegean Sea with the Black Sea.
Now, at the time, the Emperor Justinian and his wife Theodora had a palace in the city of Heron, which is near Constantinople. And if they wanted to visit Constantinople, they had to travel along the Bosphorus.
And Constantinople is, of course, the city which nowadays is known as Istanbul. And we know a song about that, don't we, Jeff?
Istanbul was Constantinople, now it's Istanbul, not Constantinople, been a long time gone. Constantinople, now it's Turk's delight on a moonlit night. Every gal in Constantinople lives in Istanbul, not Constantinople, though if you've a date in Constantinople, she'll be mating in Istanbul. Even old New York was once New Amsterdam. Why they changed it I can't say, people just liked it better that way, so take me back to Constantinople. No, I can't go back to Constantinople, been a long time gone. Constantinople, why'd Constantinople get the works? That's nobody's business but the Turks. And for approximately 50 years the Bosphorus was haunted by Bosphorus, this sea monster that was said to attack and destroy ships. It was incredibly aggressive, and it would attack any kind of vessel it came across and sink them. And Justinian was trying to think of a way to kill the monster, but he couldn't work it out. But for 50 years this tyrant of the Bosphorus, this fiend of the deep, ruled the waterway and went down in legend. And its name was given to it after a prominent charioteer at the time, so it's named after this charioteer.
And now we have yet another rabbit hole that's just opened up in front of us. I don't think I've ever known a story come up with so many strange tangents, at least certainly not in recent years. So, getting on with the story of Porphyrios the sea monster, his name is spelt in the Greek fashion, with the final three letters being IOS. However, the charioteer's name is spelt in the Latin Roman fashion, with the name ending IUS. Greek was basically the language of the Eastern Roman Empire, and it does seem strange that even one of her greatest sporting heroes had a Latin name. If anybody can tell us what happened, and if we've got this wrong, and if we have not got this wrong, an explanation for it, I would be very, very grateful.
And what happened to it finally is that it was chasing some dolphins, went into shallow water and managed to beach itself. And the local people saw that this monster that had been terrorising the Bosphorus for 50 years was now helpless, and they went to try and kill it with axes and knives and things, but they couldn't penetrate the hide, and the monster became angry and more angry at their attacks. So finally they threw ropes around it and lashed the ropes tight, and then had teams of horses to haul it further out of the sea onto the land where they could finally kill it. And they cut it up and ate it. And what it was a rogue sperm whale. Now, one of the measurements given for it was 45 feet long and 15 feet wide, which is quite small for a sperm whale. They average on 50 feet, and they can run up to 80 feet. So either this measurement was wrong, or recorded wrong, or written down wrong, or it was a undersized but freakishly aggressive individual. I tend towards the former. I think they probably got the size of it wrong. Now, there was another rogue sperm whale off the southern coast of Chile in the early part of the 19th century, called Mocha Dick, and he was what Herman Melville based Moby Dick on, and he was a white sperm whale who was 70 feet long, and he destroyed many whaling ships, in fact dozens of them, around these waters, until he was finally killed by some Swedish whalers in 1838. So it's not unknown for very aggressive sperm whales to attack and sink ships. And you've got to remember, this is sort of the fag end of the Roman Empire, we're talking about. So they wouldn't be metal ships, they'd be wooden ships, easier to stove in. And what happens is the sperm whale has this great big organ called a spermaceti in its head, and it uses that to amplify the clicks it makes when it's echolocating, and it's also used in helping it dive because it can control how dense the oil in the spermaceti is, and it helps it to, with buoyancy, it can actually make it thicker, heavier when it dives, and more buoyant when it comes back up again. But it uses its head as a battering ram, and it can smash in the side of ships. We know this story through the writings of a man called Procopius, who was a historian at the time, a contemporary of these events, and he wrote them all down and recorded them. So we know that we know this story thanks to his writings. But it's fascinating, and not only have we got an incredibly aggressive sperm whale, but we've got a weirdly coloured one. Now, Mocha Dick, that we mentioned earlier, was an albino. He was white. This one was purple. So maybe there's something in odd coloration, the genetics that gives them an odd coloration, that makes them ultra aggressive as well.
Now, there's actually a literary equivalent of this, as anybody who's ever been to my house will know. I'm a great fan of the children's books of a lady called Joan Aiken. She wrote books for adults as well, and I've read as many of them as I can get hold of. But one of the tangential characters in the third of the books in her most famous series, which began with a book called The Wolves of Willoughby Chase, and is set in an alternate 17th century, where George I never became the British king, and the young pretender, Bonnie Prince Charlie, did become the English king, the British king. And one of the books, the third one, includes a bright pink whale. This one was a very friendly whale who could sing, and her name was Rosie. But I've always been fascinated by the fact that Joan Aiken, who was very much a historian, had written about the bright pink sperm whale, and having seen the pink dolphins of Hong Kong, it makes me wonder if an albino sperm whale could actually become pink. But this one in the Turkish Straits, the Bosphorus Straits, was purple, and purple has often been the colour of anger and passion, which is quite an interesting coincidence, if it is such a thing as a coincidence. But Richard, before we go on to anything else to do with sperm whales, can you just tell me, what is ambergris?
Ambergris is the indigestible parts of squid and octopus that sperm whales eat. They feed almost exclusively on squid, octopus and other cephalopods. They will eat sharks and rays as well, and they'll eat sharks as big as the megamouth shark, which can grow to about 15-16 feet long. The sperm whale is actually only one of two whales that has a throat wide enough to swallow a human being. So the story of Bosphorus chasing dolphins maybe not be as weird as it sounds, because if he was ultra aggressive, he might be eating smaller cetaceans as well as sharks, rays and cephalopods. And he certainly could have swallowed down any human beings that fell from the ships he destroyed. But ambergris is made of these indigestible parts of the cephalopods, the beaks and the claws in the suckers. And they form this greyish mass in the stomach of a sperm whale. And at one time it was thought that they vomited them out and it was whale vomit. But they don't. They pass them like dung, but it's this solid grey mass, and it's used as a fixant for perfumes, and it's worth a fantastic amount. I think it's worth more than its weight in gold, because it's used as a fixant for the creation of perfumes. So perfumes are made using whale shit.
I wonder who first discovered that.
And how?
And how and why. But anyway,
The colour purple, incidentally, in Rome, it was a royal colour because they made purple dye from seashells, and it was very expensive to make, and not a lot of people had it. So the name Porphyros, Purple Boy, was an honorific to, a mark of respect to how powerful and dangerous he was.
something which has just come to my mind is that there is, of course, another very famous, very ancient whale which had its throat big enough to swallow humans in the eastern Mediterranean, the biblical story of Jonah, who may or may not have been swallowed by a whale.
Mm.
That just came to mind as you were talking about it.
Yeah.
What's the other species of whale that's throat's wide enough to do
The
that?
killer whale.
Can killer whales actually swallow humans?
A killer whale can swallow a human.
Good lord.
Now, killer whales have only ever killed humans in captivity, as far as we know. There's been no verified case of them killing anybody in the wild. In captivity, they go mad. They start displaying very strange, aberrant behaviour. But in the wild, as far as we know, they've never killed anybody. That doesn't mean to say that they haven't, but there's no recorded cases of them killing people. I mean, they may have devoured Eskimos hundreds of years ago in the Arctic and we don't know about it, but there's been no proven case. But their throat is wide enough to swallow a human being.
Have we got any other stories about whales attacking boats?
I'm sure there must be. I can't think of any offhand, only Mocha Dick and Porphyros, but there must be others.
The thing which immediately struck me when you first told me the story of Bosphorus is how narrow the Bosphorus actually is. It's so narrow. And the idea of having a bloody great whale patrolling up and down this very narrow strip of sea. I'll just bring up a picture of it up onto the screen here so you can see it's incredibly narrow. And the idea of having a whale, a monster that's that aggressive, patrolling that bit of sea must have been an incredible problem for the Ottoman government. And I'm editing this the next day, and of course it wasn't a problem for the Ottoman government because the Ottoman government didn't exist. It was a problem for the Byzantine government, or, if you prefer, the government of the Eastern Roman Empire, because after the Western Roman Empire fell apart, the Eastern Roman Empire took over the mantle and carried on for hundreds more years.
Well, it completely destroyed the shipping industry along the area. But apparently he wasn't there all the time. There'd be certain times when Porphyros would vanish, apparently going out into the deeper sea again, but he would always return, he would always come back. So he haunted this place, this stretch of water for 50 years, destroying any ship he came across. Maybe it was something to do with the fact it was such a narrow stretch of water that made the whale so aggressive.
Yeah, well, you said that the killer whales in captivity go nutsoid because they're in such tiny quarters. I remember seeing the killer whale at Windsor Safari Park back in the 70s, and it was tiny. It was in a swimming pool sized, not a big Olympic swimming pool, school swimming pool sized pond. And I saw another one that they had at a really crappy attraction at Niagara Falls many years later, and they were both kept in impossibly small enclosures, the sort of thing that if you kept a human being in prison in that sort of sized enclosure, you'd be up against the European Court of Human Rights.
What surprised me is that no one's ever made a film about it. It would be a great subject for a docudrama, a sort of historic film, wouldn't it?
There's a couple of other things that came to mind after we'd finished recording that. The first is when Richard was talking about spermaceti and why sperm whales were basically hunted for the oil from the organs in their huge heads. And I found it both touching and interesting that at King Charles's recent coronation he instructed the people who made the anointing oils to not use spermaceti or musk from a civet cat, and he wanted the anointing oils to be purely vegetable in origin and completely cruelty free, which I think was a nice touch. But also at the coronation, I don't know if you saw this, but there were two different coaches used. One of them was covered with carvings of tritons, tritons being Middle Eastern sea gods, strange aquatic creatures which some people believe actually fell from the stars. Some people even believe that they were some sort of aquatic alien, which, by the way, is where I got my name for my long-standing band back in the day, John Downes and the Amphibians from Outer Space. I'd been reading a book called The World Atlas of Mysteries by Francis Hitchings, and one of the chapters was about these peculiar Middle Eastern alien fish gods, and it was called the Amphibians from Outer Space, and I thought, that's a fantastic name for a band. I bet nobody else will ever think of that, so I nicked it. But the most interesting thing, as far as I'm concerned, about the story of Porphyrios is that it seems that everybody had heard of it, except for Richard and me. I had never heard of it, Richard never heard of it, and it was so well known, Porphyrios even has a Wikipedia page, and featured in Gibbons's 18th century Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. There's even been a historical novel that he's appeared in. And Richard and I have been doing this, looking at the more outre parts of the natural kingdom for years, 30 years in both of our cases really, and we'd never heard of this, which I think is an object lesson for us all, because no matter how long you study things, no matter how long you consider yourself to be an expert, there's always something new that can come round and bite you in the bum.
Well, you know, when they were hunting that giant murder whale in the Bosphorus, and the Emperor Justinian designed this giant harpoon to kill him with, and they jabbed it into the purple whale and said, "Indigo!" If you want to support us, and help us make more content like these, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page and check out our Patreon.
And as the ghost of Joe Strummer, who's an ever more regular visitor to my little studio, wants me to remind you, always press the notification bell, or else you won't be told when the next show's going to be. And that would be an awful pity, wouldn't it? And so, ladies and gentlemen, here we are at the end of another show. I hope you enjoyed it as much as Richard and I enjoyed it putting it together. I'd like to thank Richard very, very much indeed for everything he's done in this episode, and also for looking after me while Graham, who's normally my carer and normally the guy who pushes me around hospital corridors in my wheelchair, is off gallivanting around Arizona and somewhere up in the Pacific Northwest. I also want to say a big, big thank you to Louis, my producer, who's a complete sweetie pie, but for whom we wouldn't be able to get this whole show on the road. And a big, big thank you to Miss Karen, my lovely secretary, and to Miss Judy, my lovely housekeeper, who really do stop my life from turning into some sort of disgusting version of something by Hieronymus Bosch. Thank you very much, my darlings. I do truly appreciate all that you do for me. I also want to say a big thank you and a hello to Miss Maxine. Hello, Miss Maxine. And I want to talk now to Mr. McCrinnan. Are you listening, Mr. McCrinnan? Because I'm going to be back on Wednesday and it's going to be another book review show. But, Mr. McCrinnan, I'll also be back next Saturday at 3 o'clock with my guests being the lovely Alison Journlin and the equally lovely Ronan Coghlan. And you want to know what's going to happen then, Mr. McCrinnan? Well, I am going to be just pootling about on the screen. I'll be in the live chat and I'll be doing all the other things. And assuming that you are all going to be there to see me, Mr. McCrinnan, I'll be seeing you.